Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sophie Meunier, the co-director of the European Union program at Princeton. And on behalf of the Woodrow Wilson School, I'm honored to welcome Minister Arnaud Montebourg to Princeton, where he's visiting this week as the school 2015 Sigmund-Rhee 1910 lecturer. Welcome also to the audience, and particularly to the very numerous members of the French media who are here, who've demonstrated a remarkable interest in Monsieur Montebourg's visit to Princeton. I was going to introduce Arnaud as a French politician of the Socialist Party, who has long advocated institutional change in France from the 5th to the 6th Republic, and who came in third in the primaries for the Socialist Party, leading to the 2012 presidential elections. I was also going to present Mr. Montebourg as the former French Minister for Industrial Renewal and Minister of the Economy, posts which he occupied between the election of President Hollande in 2012 until last August. I was going to mention how controversial were some of your policy positions that you took during that time, how vociferous you were in advocating for the Made in France during your tenure, and how public was your fight, both with French President Hollande and with the European institutions over the question of austerity, which ultimately led to the resignation or cabinet reshuffle last summer. And I was also going to describe you with some choice words which are usually associated with your name, adjectives such as eloquent and charismatic, but also mercantilist and sometimes very provocative, which are the adjectives that are usually used. But I've decided instead to take my cues from the way the American media has been describing you over the past couple of days. After the widely reported accident that happened to you on Friday. And everybody's laughing, so I assume most people know, but for those who don't, Monsieur Montebourg was eating in a restaurant in New York when a giant 15-feet-long mirror fell over his table, and he held the heavy mirror with his arms until his fellow diners who were trapped underneath were able to escape. Was slightly injured in the process, but we're very happy that you're doing fine. So instead, I'm going to introduce our speaker today as, in the immortal words of the New York Daily News, a hero, and in the words of the New York Post, Superman. So you may not know that, but the actor who really has immortalized Superman, Christopher Reeve, was actually from Princeton, grew up in this city. So today, Princeton is hosting a real-life Superman. More seriously, we very much look forward to hearing you speak about the American and European economic crisis in comparative perspective. The talk will be followed by questions and answers, and as is the tradition here at the Woodrow Wilson School, we will call first on the students to ask questions, and the students will be will asked to line up behind the microphones here. We'll leave ample time for questions, and then we'll try to wrap everything up by about 5:45. And I will ask the audience to stay seated while our speaker exits. So on this, thank you very much for accepting Princeton's invitation, the Woodrow Wilson School invitation, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thanks to Sophie, talented Sophie Meunier, and the European program for this warm invitation and introduction also. Thank you to the Princeton University, very fabulous university, that many French people, some are there here, have in their dreams. Thank you to the Woodrow Wilson School. This is the name of in which it involves the European program that Sophie Meunier leads. This is very interesting to have this comparison between two powerful territories, very important as America and, well, United States of America and the European Union with both their problems. But thank you also for this invitation, because it was a unique experience this weekend to try all the public utilities in New York City. Fire department, very good. New York Police Department, very, very accurate. And also the hospital in Bellevue. The nice stretchers of the policemen and the firefighters. Well, I'm not Superman, because I wasn't able to change the course of the austerity programs in Europe. So thank you for your compliments, but it was just life, and I'm very well. Thank you. The scanners of the hospital were very good. Thank you very much. Just a word to compare those crises between the US and the European countries. Because, in fact, it's not only the diseases that we're going to compare, also the remedies and the policy making, the policies that are have been chosen by the runners of those countries. Some have failed, some have been successes. So this is the topic of this meeting. And I will start saying that President Obama in the 2015 State of the Union speech, in the very first words, he said, "Tonight, we turn the page of the Great Recession." Unfortunately, I cannot say the same thing for Europe. Today, in Europe, especially in the Eurozone, we are stuck in the same page. Since now, 7 years after the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, when the problems have started. So the page of the Great Recession is now becoming a kind of, as some of European economists say, a non-ending book of what is called secular stagnation. They think that we are now, growth is over. And many of the politicians are thinking that we have to manage with no more growth, which is a way of refusing what's going on everywhere. And let's remember that, first of all, the crisis was at the beginning in the United States and was deeper in this side of the Atlantic with the burst of the subprime bubble, remember, the collapse of the housing market, and the failure of Lehman Brothers. And some officials in the European Union even thought that it could stay here, not coming over there. It was like the Chernobyl radiation. It should have come through the borders. But it was a mistake. And I would show on the first graph the striking difference between the courses in real GDP. I don't talk about the potential GDP, of course. But the real one is very striking because on both sides, since 2000, prior to the crisis, the Eurozone's real GDP was on a slower path than in the US. And since the global crisis of 2008, the divergence has increased further. Real GDP in the Eurozone stagnated, and in the 2014 was even lower than 2008. It's very striking. And any can observe, after the dip of 2009, a relative parallel and strong recovery. But US recovery is much more pronounced then and then in the Eurozone. And we can observe a double dip recession that only the Eurozone experience. And it's after 12 and 13, 2012, 2013. Sorry, I'm mixing the numbers. So everywhere in the world, growth is making a spectacular comeback. Everywhere. Even in United Kingdom, about more than 2.5. Japan, with the politic of the Abenomics, everywhere out of the Eurozone. And it's a real economic failure for this zone. I would give you the numbers. In 12, it's minus 0.6 in the Eurozone. In 13, minus 0.4. 14, it's 0.8. So it's very specific of the Eurozone, and it may be very serious and dangerous to follow on that trend. And since Lehman Brothers fell and the crisis started at the beginning, the difference between the US and the UE in cumulative GDP is 10 points. The difference between the blue and the red is 10-point GDP. The US created $450 billion of wealth more than the Eurozone, which is quite. And now, and this is the second graph, this is the unemployment rate. Look at that, you have all the courses. The US economy is growing and creating jobs at the fastest pace since 1999. And the US unemployment rate is now below 6. In 2008, the unemployment rate in the US was similar to the one of the Eurozone, 10% on the both sides. Now, in the US, it's 6%, and in the Eurozone, it's about 12, 11.5, which is quite much. So you can see the problem between the difference between the two zones, and in a comparative perspective, we have to wonder what happened. And before giving my own opinion, I would just try to listen with you to the most respected authorities in the world economy. Those economists are various, coming from many and many backgrounds, Nobel laureates, political leaders, European ministers, head of global institutions. I will start with the most famous for you in Princeton, Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize. I had the honor to meet 2 days ago. I quote, "In Europe, the nightmare scenario is no longer hypothetical. Stalled industrial production raises the fear of another recession in Europe. The first reason is being austerity. The problem stems from the much too heavy influence inflation hawks have in the public discourse, and this is terrifying. Many important people have been swayed by the cult of austerity, by the belief that budget deficits are the most immediate danger and not mass unemployment." Joseph Stiglitz, former advisor of Bill Clinton, former president of the World Bank, another Nobel laureate, quote, "We have known since the Great Depression in 1929 that austerity doesn't work. The IMF has recently demonstrated through its intervention in Latin America and Asia, and it's yet again the case in Europe. What is uncanny is the number of political leaders who continue to rely on these discredited policies, even though authorities as conservative as the IMF are telling them that austerity is dangerous and that they must rapidly take care of stimulating their economies." And this is the case. Christine Lagarde. Christine Lagarde was the Minister of Economy of Nicolas Sarkozy. He's a left-wing, not a left-wing politician in France, and she's now the director of the IMF. She was saying last year, "We should not engage in any further budgetary consolidation. The greatest risk in the Eurozone is low inflation, and within the Eurozone, additional support to current demand is necessary," unquote. The chief economist of the IMF, Mr. Blanchard, he's a functionary, a civil servant. He declared the IMF itself has underestimated the impact of austerity measures on growth. I could add the OECD Secretary General, the director of the International Labour Organization. I have to quote Mr. Sigmar Gabriel. He's the Minister of Economy of Germany, but I would quote him when he was not in charge, before he was in the opposition. The plan imposed by Mrs. Merkel in Europe led to anorexia. Germany, leaders in export, will itself be subject to the crisis if policies of austerity persist. And of course, unquote, last year, recession has hit Germany. Enrico Letta, Elio Di Rupo, Matteo Renzi, many other politicians in Europe are saying exactly the same. Their interpretation are quite similar. And I can remember when President Hollande came for an official visit in the White House and see President Obama, we were some ministers around him in February last year. And I remember President Obama saying, well, it's quite casual, informal. He was saying, hey, guys, we've done the job with growth. And now, what are you doing? You, European. What's going on with Europe? We need you. You had us, so now, what's on? And President Hollande answered, you don't know Mrs. Merkel. You don't know Mrs. Merkel. And the problem, and I would be rather, in fact, I would approve that point of view, that the problem is the ideological stubbornness of European leaders. Obstinacy gives wrong medicine, and wrong medicine is austerity. And the European Union insistence, led by Germany, pushed by government to reduce deficits, cutting spendings, raising taxes, stands in the way of growth and prosperity. Even the central bank, European Central Bank, has taken much time to change their mind in adopting quantitative easing, unconventional policies, ask for being helped. And Mr. Draghi, who is a great leader in Europe, has asked in his speech of Jackson Hole in the Wyoming in last August, he said, we want government take your responsibility and their responsibility. We have taken ours by changing. You have to change the fiscal policy of many policymakers and leaders in governments of a European country. And we understand the main reason for the weakness of the recovery in European Union for this recession is two words, fiscal policy. I would say a word about that. Three economists of the IMF, Mr. Coase, Lungari, and Teones, wrote, the current and projected path of government expenditures in the advanced economies are quite different than during past recoveries. During past recoveries, fiscal policy was decisively expansionary, with increase in real primary government expenditure. This time is different, and this appears in this course of the deficits. You can see difference between the United States and the European Union. They don't use public expenditures to solve the problems in Europe. They use very well in the United States, but the difference is in the growth. So, in fact, the most important question today in Europe is how to revive growth and avoid the Japanese syndrome of deflation's last decade. And the answer, according to me, is changing political minds. Economy is politics, and growth also, or growth is politics. And the main economic problem today for European firms, when we make inquiries upon what they need, we have in France every 3 months an inquiry in firm, and we ask, government ask, what are their problems? Supply side, demand side, both. 65% say we do not have demand. So we cannot hire workers, we cannot invest, we cannot have future. So we don't move. This is the question. Why do politicians in Europe make a supply-side policy? Why? When companies, firms, economy ask for demand-side policy? That's the big question. And Danny Roderick is a professor in Harvard. He's Turkish and very, very accurate. He said he has a political interpretation. He said the absence of European-wide democratic accountability plays into the economic misdiagnostic. This means that there's no political debate about what's going wrong, what we shall do in the European Union. We don't have a political arena where we can speak, discuss, address the problem. This is a big difference with the United States of America. Europe is divided, so the debates are taking place inside the state members, in the countries, through the government and the parliament, national parliaments, not in the wide area of the Eurozone. And I'm afraid it's quite true, the diagnostic of Danny Roderick. And everybody now, the result is that everybody now is aligned on the same mistake in European Union. The debate is quite difficult in Europe because we have a construction of European Union based upon rules, legal rules. You have to follow the rules, to apply, to implement. But when you apply legal rules, you do not make choice, even when the good choice for economy are not in the rules which have been invented 3 decades before. That's the question. And we have also a debate which has changed economy in moralism. The one who are bad, the good pupils, the bad pupils, and the one who are very good pupils. So the bad is, of course, Greek people, so they have to pay. That reminds me what happened after the Second World War. Many people were saying, well, Germans have been awful, they have to pay. That was the First World War, and it made the second one. That's stupid. Economy is not moralism. Economy is efficiency. And I'm very happy to see that the G20, OCDE, IMF, Nobel Prizes, many governments, from Mr. Obama to the Australian and Japanese one, are asking the same to European leaders of their country. And there is no answer, only I have to apply rules. And this is not the good moral of the story. And during that time, and this is quite a tragedy for many European citizens, we have problem with populism. Because if Europe had made a promise, the promise to give growth and prosperity to many of them, of their citizens, and if the promise is not here, what are thinking good faith citizens? They think that there's something wrong. So now many of citizens are saying, we don't want any longer of this Europe. I would say, I remember what Paul Krugman said on one in his New York Times opinion. He said something like, and it was a statement that was concerning the minister I was. He said that François Hollande had purged the member of his government daring to question France's subversions to Berlin and Brussels, quote, unquote. Well, that was the time when some politicians, some leaders, I want one among others, said, please, there is a problem. We should listen to what the world is saying. The recipes of America What's going on right in America? Look at the red, look at the blue. Let's think that there could be another policy. And in that time, what happened, in fact, is a purge. They said, you go away. And I did agree, because when there are disagreements, the only solution is to have a good separation, nice divorce, a smart one. But the question is still on the table now. We are having a tragic revival of the 30s, because in many countries, people are voting for political parties supporting the breakup of the Eurozone. And the cost of a breakup, even in order or disorder, it doesn't matter, is incalculable. And may be for Europe a chaos program. Chaos, the cow. This is the good, it's the good word, isn't it? Yes. Thank you. No, I have a doubt. Sometimes I'm doubtful about the words. Sorry. In conclusion, because that would be interesting to have discussion altogether. In comparative perspective, European Union is divided. United States is unified. That's the difference on federal economic issue. European Union has institution that does not give the possibility to get out of the box to make the good choices that United States has done. That's the difference. And the divergence between the member states, state members of the country of the European Union are important. I will finish on that point. It has always been shown the couple France-Germany. It is said this is the engine of Europe. And the divergence of Europe is cutting France and Germany into parts. Germany has a population and demography decreasing. In 20 years, France will have more population than Germany. And France has a big demography. The population is increasing. The one has not need as growth, doesn't need growth. Because when the population decreases, they still have enough for people. France needs big growth. 2% is necessary to create employment. If we do not have, we have 25% of the youth unemployed. In Spain and Italy, it's 50%. You see what desperate this youth is now, in which mood this youth is in. And they are voting now for the populism and extremism party. So it shows how nervous European leaders are now because of the new events, political traduction of this economical failure. And my conclusion is that we have to solve this problem. The divergence is not only political, the divergence is quasi-anthropological, demographical, and this is the work we have to do for the future of Europe to be as red as the United States of America. You have seen, I'm not Superman, because you can measure the big job we have to do. And the President Obama was right. What about your job? We have done ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That reminds me, I need to add to your very busy schedule in Princeton a meeting with Danny Roderick, who's actually here. No,
I didn't know.
He's at the Institute for
Sorry.
So. We're going to take questions. We have plenty of time, which is wonderful. So I will ask those interested in asking questions, especially the students. We'll start with students. You can line up and come down, be brave, come down to the microphones.
Hi, Michael Smits de Strasbourg, but I'll ask in English, I guess. What responsibility do you think immigration, because you talk a little bit about anthropology and demographics, what's the responsibility of immigration in terms of the economic recoveries and deficits?
Quelle est la responsabilité de l'immigration? Oh. I don't think there is any responsibility about immigration in these questions. France has an immigration that has not changed and is lower than in the 30s because there is a kind of better control of the borders. And the European program on immigration is tighter than before. So there's no responsibility about that. I think the responsibility is about policymakers.
So I have a very simple question, actually, because it seems like so much of the economic problems come from the fact that it's not a political union in Europe. So is the solution that Europe needs to become the United States of Europe?
That was the Victor Hugo program. And he was visionary. And I would say today that we need somewhere when we can take decisions. And this is, in fact, we have something in common. We have federal institution as the European Central Bank. It's a federal institution because we have a common currency. It's a public good, money. And the ECB has done something very interesting. They have been crossing the limits of their mandate. QE was theoretically forbidden. And they are now buying some sovereign debts of the state members. And they permit the national banks to do so. So we have some federal institutions, when they are be confronted to a crisis situation, they are able to say, well, let's go out of the box. This is the common sense, and this is the common interest that we have to defend. We need the same in fiscal policy, of course. But it's difficult because this belongs to the sovereignty of parliament. So you have to share, to frame a new parliament with powers in the Eurozone. But this means that Eurozone may not be a European zone with 28 people speaking 5 minutes with politicians and political speaking without the possibility of making a consent. So the institutions have to be reformed. And talking about economy, this is the respective weight of the state members of the economies that have to be taken in the strategy of reframing institution. But we are very far from this because it's impossible to make new institutions when you are in crisis. We have to do so with what we have. And what I did not accept as Minister of Economy is the way that the rules are twisted. You know, rules is something that you use when you are interested in. This is the way it is twisted. Well, rules is against the deficits countries, but also for surpluses countries. It should be the same, because when you are making a union, you have to balance the efforts. The efforts have to come from the deficit countries, but also from the surpluses country. And there are some in Europe. European Union, the institution, who are the guards, as we say, the guards of the treaties. they forget sometimes to read all the treaty. So there is something that we have to change. It is not to apply rules, but to be clever enough collectively to be a union. And this is not the case now, and the fact. And it means that the divergence, that very structural, deep in the societies, have to be overtaken. Am I clear?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a simple question, but it's a complicated issue, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe actually, I'd like to push you on one thing you just mentioned. You said, well, now is a crisis, it's not the time to change the institutions, but isn't it the reverse? Is it precisely when you have a crisis that it's easier to change institutions?
You're right. When there's crisis, everybody violates the rules. So there is something new which is getting out from this situation. But the new is not written. It is unwritten and not said. But that could be the opportunity. We have problems now because some countries say they use rules for getting hidden behind, and others want to overrule those rules. So this is the divergence on the vision of Europe, which is not so far shared. So this is the difficulty.
Can you please identify yourself when you ask your question?
Hi, I'm Charles Ann. What do you think are some of the factors that are causing slow growth in the Eurozone?
Quels sont les facteurs qui causent le peu de croissance dans la zone euro?
I will give you some example to answer your question to what's going on with austerity that has been stigmatized by many, many economists and governments. In France, it is 70 billion euros that have been taken to the economy as new taxes between 2011 to 2013. It was 18 billion in 11, 22 billion in 12, and 29 billion in 13. In 3.5 points GDP that has been taxed. That was what we call fiscal austerity. And we have made the calculation of what's going on for an average family. They lost in 2013 1,650 euros per family in average. So they don't consume. So the machine is stopped. And the companies, the firm are saying, well, I'm waiting for the market to wake up. I'm waiting for the demand. What is the good news is the euro coming down. But only 12% of the companies in France, in my country, are declaring working for the exportation, which means that 88% work with domestic issues. So the purchase power, as we say, is not enough to lead on. The breakup of the austerity is to stop new taxes, is stop new cuts in spending. This is the job. And Brussels pushed the governments to follow on. Why? Because the treaty says it's 3% deficit of public administration, so you have to apply the treaty, even if it's obsolete and stupid. What for? For killing economy? This is what was saying, I remember Stiglitz. He was saying many things. It's a medieval, he was saying that. I will find his beautiful sentence. He said, it's like a medieval medicine. The answer, I quote, even though they see over and over again that austerity leads to collapse of the economy, the answer over and over from politicians is more austerity. It reminds me of medieval medicine. It's like bloodletting when you took blood out of a patient because the theory was there was bad humors. And very often when you took the blood out, the patient got sicker. The response, in the theory, then was more bloodletting until the patient very nearly died. This is what Stiglitz says, he's absolutely right. And what's happening in Europe, this is his conclusion, is a mutual suicide pact. We got it. So again, suicide, there are people who want to live. I belong to this category.
Okay, thank you.
This side, Victoria.
So I'm Victoria May. You said the European Union was led by rules, and France, as one of the leading countries of the Eurozone, was asked to take measures. Last week, a bill was voted in, well, not voted. The government used the 49-3 to pass the bill. This bill is supposed to improve growth in France. I'd like to know what you think about that bill and if you had voted it.
Well, this bill was initially an anti-privilege bill. That means that all the rentiers, people who are sitting in good position in an economic situation, can take good revenues to people who have no choice to take their service. So in fact, this, for instance, what we call huissier de justice, notaire, lawyers, many very special services, very expensive. And initially, this bill was to reduce privilege. But with the fight of those corporatism, many things of that has been alleviated, attenué. I don't know how to say that. I think you understand me, I'm not sure. Yeah. My French is better than my English, I'm sorry.
Mine too.
And so the trouble is that I feel this law is not enough courageous on this point. And what happened, and that's the reason I think this law, this bill has lost the support. They have changed many laws that protect workers. So the left wing didn't support the law, instead of the right wing didn't support the law. So nobody supports the law. So that's what happened. I don't know what I would have done because I'm not member of parliament. But what I can say, because many people have said that I had prepared this bill. Yes, I had prepared it, but I didn't manage with it. Sure that it's not my law. This is another bill than the one that I had in mind. C'est clair ou c'est incompréhensible?
Taran Krishnan. So there are restrictions put onto euro area economies such as the Stability and Growth Pact, most specifically having a government debt to GDP ratio of 3%. Do you think there's a need to change the rules or just get rid of them altogether in order to get away from this austere program that many European leaders have imposed?
There's so many people lining up that actually I'm going to collect a few questions, so you can write down this one and we'll take the next one.
Okay, hi. So I was just wondering what your opinions were on perhaps the Fed raising interest rates, as people are saying later this year in June. So my question is, like, do you think this is the right time to be doing this, especially as we're seeing this huge dependency on consumer spending here in the U.S. and the devaluing of the euro on the euro area side and this rise in exports therefore there? Do you think this is the right time for the U.S. to be doing this? Because in this globalized world that we live in right now, any sort of negative implication that this could have on the American economy could perhaps negatively impact the euro area economy in the future?
Here, in order to build a more political Europe, you need the public opinion of Germany, the wealthiest and the biggest country in Europe. How do you plan to get that from a country which is very wealthy, with a very a good growth, one better than in France, and an opinion, a public opinion, which considers the economic economics at a very moralist level? How do you plan to conciliate French and German public opinion to have it on your board?
Hi. So, kind of in link with what was just asked, I was wondering what incentives would you give to countries like the United Kingdom, who you stated as having a good growth rate right now, to take part in those new regulations, this new legislation, this new European Union, when there is really no incentive for them to do so, especially considering that they are not part of the Eurozone?
Voilà, pareil, c'est un peu plus ou moins la même question sur le Royaume-Uni.
There are some ideas in Europe that I would advise to have a glance to, because many of competitive economists, internationally competitive economists, have decided to provide independent alternative reports to the annual growth survey that publish every year the Commission, European Commission. So there is another way of thinking in Europe now, and many economists participate into this work. And this is the independent annual growth survey that you should have a glance, because he answers all your questions, structural, conjunctural. And my advice is to say that some of economists, very, very famous, like Michel Aglietta, propose to stop with the treaties that contain some very special rules, as the 3% as public administration deficits, GDPs. And this rule has to be, as they say, stopped, because it's one of the problem of the impossibility to find a solution on the crisis. And this is one of the proposals that are now on the table. What has done Juncker with his plan of $300 billion? Well, my opinion is about this plan, it matched out about nothing, because there is no fresh money. But it's interesting to see that the Juncker plan plans the non-implementation of the treaties and the rules of the treaties. So that, in fact, even if the crisis is very destructive in Europe, and politically the consequences are huge, there are some institutions that are trying to have a good federal attitude to find big solutions to the problem that we are facing now. So I would say that there are some voices, very, very serious and famous in Europe, who defend a new strategy with changing the treaties. So it's a new point. Michel Aglietta has published a book a few months ago, Getting Out of Crisis and Inventing the Future. I think it's going to be translated in English. The second question was about the interest rates of the Fed. Well, it's not bad for Europe that the dollar goes up when the euro goes down. And historically, it was $1 for €1. So we need to have the same balance and to find the good balance. So I would say that upping the interest rates is, well, now you have an unemployment rate at a good level, at a better level, the one you had before the crisis, the Lehman Brothers crisis. I would say that the fact that inflation is not very high, but there may be, because of the quantitative easing for years and years, some bubbles forming again. There might be some tensions. So it is rational that the Fed has taken such a decision. But I would say that they are more flexible than in the ECB. And the way Bernanke and Mrs. Janet Yellen has worked with the rates were better for getting from the crisis than what we've done in the Eurozone. I remember that Mr. Trichet, who was before Mr. Draghi, the head of the ECB, had pushed up the rates, interest rates, in 2011. That was incredible. In the crisis of euro, Greek problems, the rates goes up. Nobody understood. Now, with the speech of Jackson Hole, the speech of the whatever it takes doctrine that Mr. Draghi has done in London in 2012, we have a solid strategy to have a new currency with the dollar better than before. And I think the one-to-one shall be the good balance between the dollar zone and the eurozone. Talking about conciliation with Germany. Well, Germany needs Europe, and Europe needs Germany. France needs Europe, and Europe needs France. So everybody has to make an effort. But the trouble is that the leaders, the politicians leading countries have to defend their interests as harshly as German leaders do there. That's the point. And this should be a good compromise to find in the end of the discussion and the talks. But those talks haven't taken place. And that's the question. So there's no conciliation that has begun because there is no discussion and talk about what should be the new Europe after the crisis. And now the policy that Germany imposes to the whole Europe doesn't work. This is a sufficient motive to say, now we have to stop with this. But it hasn't been said by European leaders. UK, European people fear that United Kingdom decide to go out in the next referendum. But what I notice is the growth is higher, and the policy making in the Bank of England was quite unconventional years and years before the ECB ago. And for instance, they have bought and purchased some sovereign bonds and government debts, so that in fact austerity was less harsh than any elsewhere in the Eurozone because of this policy on monetary informal ground. So the numbers are very good for Great Britain. I have them here. We're about 2 and 3. 2 and 3. Because they don't apply the Eurozone austerity motions.
Okay, we'll take another round.
Sure. Hi, my name is JT. Thank you for being here today. So my question is, given the recent situation with Greece and the lingering uncertainty in the Eurozone, as you alluded to before, the pro-austerity movement has taken a lot of hold and seems to be really setting the agenda in the short term. Do you see that continuing in the short term? Is that something that we're just going to have to suffer through and kind of deal with on the other side? And moving forward, I was hoping you could elaborate a little more on what you might see as potential avenues for compromise with the rest of the European Union.
Monsieur Montebourg, you make a compelling argument for fighting austerity through alternative solutions, and I was wondering, in your opinion, if you believe that these new solutions for reinvigorating the economy and hope in economic stimulation comes from the emergence of these new sectors, such as in culture and in technology, or through the reinvigoration of traditional sectors.
Corey Simmons, Rutgers Law. So the economic recovery in the U.S. and Germany has been attributed by many to laws allowing flexibility in the labor market. What role do you see labor law reform playing in economic resurgence in EU generally and in France specifically?
Monsieur Montebourg, Quentin Béchot. I was wondering if you talked about how European industries have a demand problem, and in your opinion, would a transatlantic free trade zone between the USA and the European Union be beneficial to the EU in its in solving its sort of demand crisis, or would it cause more harm in Europe than it would do good? Thank you.
Well, the Greece, of course, is an important question, and thank you for asking a few questions about the compromise that has to be found. Of course, the Greek government has been elected, first. Second, there are some engagements. Are they relevant or not? Do they work or not? And I would say no. Those engagements that has been taken were excessive. And that was the reason why the government Greek has been elected, this one. Why? Because some mistakes have been made. Thinking that austerity may help to pay for the debt is mathematically impossible. Because when you kill economy, nobody can pay for the debt. When you help for growth, everybody can pay. That's it. So Greek have to pay for what they owe. But Europe, and what is said, Troika, ECB, IMF, and so on, European Commission, they have to recognize their mistakes. So this will be the good compromise. It will take time. They have 4 months to succeed. We're going to encourage them here from Princeton. The second question was about the growth sectors. There are so many new sectors, but there is also a revival of old ones. What I've noticed in the strategy of President Obama when he said during the campaign, let's bring our jobs back home, it was the resourcing strategy, coming back with old industries and using the shale gas, low prices of energy as a strategy to resource what had been outsourced before during the last decade. And I've initiated the same thing in France. I think there are many heavy industries that have disappeared that can revive because there is a new border of technology that had been crossed. Something new happens in many sectors, of course. And I would say in car building, what the new frontier and why Renault and Peugeot, exactly as General Motors here, has Toyota in Japan, is inventing electric cars, alleviated cars, and cheap cars. This is the three borders of car industries. 2 years ago, I've heard many editorialists saying, car industry is dying in France, it's over. And now Renault is resourcing, and they are engaging 1,000 workers because they have inventing the new strategy for it. Because of technological new means. I could say that in digital sector, cultural and digital sector, there are a boom of creativity. In France, for instance, it's a place where the new industry is coming out. And some of those start-uppers are telling us, well, it's easier for us to work in France than going to China. And everybody has noticed that the wages in China are going up 25% each year, up. So things are changing in the globalization. So many opportunities are coming back. And many sectors that everybody could think they were dying are living. What about the structural reforms? I've been questioned about this problem. Well, there are many reforms. Are they efficient? They can't be efficient because there are no demands. There's no growth. So it's difficult to make reform when there's nothing to share. But when these reforms are going up, you need a minimum of consent to do it. There's no consent because there's no growth. So I would say austerity has to be done with public expenditure when we have growth, not when we have not. And also reform have to be done when we have growth. It's more difficult when we have not. But many people working on those topics have ideas about structural reforms. But there's no efficiency because nobody wants any reform, because everybody thinks those reforms are alleviating protection to them. The transatlantic treaty, well, it's not growth which is at stake. It's sovereignty. The question for French people, for German people, and they are demonstrating against the treaty. Many big parts of public opinion is against this treaty. Why? Because they say, look, a company can make a lawsuit to a state when it changes its law. It's not acceptable because the sovereignty of the law cannot be broken by a trial, international tribunal, or judge and court, who would say that there is a better law than the one we choose. That's the only point. And there is a problem and a trouble that France and European Union have signed with Canada. So it's difficult to say to the United States that we do not want something that we have accepted from the Canada. That's the trouble.
Okay, let's take one last round of questions. Right?
The last question?
Mr. Montebourg, my question is not about economics, it's about politics. There's a large portion, as you mentioned, of the youth in France and Europe that is more and more attracted by the far right after the economic crisis. How do we talk to them? How do we convince them that it's not the right solution? And how do we educate the people who tend to vote for the extremes and to tell them that there's still hope in changing the policies? Thank you.
Monsieur Montebourg, my name is Caroline Chironi. I had a question regarding if you could redo your role as Minister of Industrial Renewal, what would you do better this time around to reduce unemployment and improve the economic situation?
Qu'est-ce que je ferais?
Si vous, allez, vous pouvez recommencer.
So in France and many other Euro area countries, small and medium enterprises were hit very hard by the recession. And in order to facilitate economic growth in the future, do you think it is important to nurture these small and medium-sized enterprises or to promote more larger-sized companies? And if so, how?
Est-ce qu'il faut aider plutôt les PME pour faire repartir la croissance ou plutôt les grosses compagnies?
Monsieur Montebourg, I'm Bouyan, and thank you for being here today. I was really interested when you mentioned Abenomics and as well as the Japanese car industry because, in fact, I'm from Japan. And I was wondering, even though we keep in mind the fact that small country, like Japan is a small country with a shrinking population, in contrast to the United States, which is very big, or in Europe, which is also very big, and where there's free circulation of people and goods, even though we keep in mind these differences, do you believe that the European Union and the United States have some things to learn from smaller countries such as Japan outside of the Western Hemisphere?
Thank you. I would begin with your question about Japan. Of course, there are many lessons from Japanese policies. I've said to somebody, I was with President Hollande in the official visit to Japan and Tokyo, and we talked to Shinzo Abe. Well, he's not a left-wing leader, as you know. He's a nationalist leader of Japan. He's very gifted. And there is something I said to the Minister of Economy I met there. I said, congratulations about the Abenomics, because you are breaking all the préjugés, all the prejudices about economic theory we are dying with in Europe. And of course, what they've done to get out from deflation, what we call the last decade of Japan, lost decade of Japan in deflation, it's very, very interesting what happened. So there are many lessons. And sometimes, many of my speeches all around France, Europe, in the world, I was saying Japan is interesting. They're doing the same monetary policy as United Kingdom, as United States of America. This is the good example for what's going on in Europe. What to say to the youth who are losing their temper? Just to do something, to give them some job. That's not acceptable that when you start in life, you have no chance to have a work, so you think you have no future. All the society is made for those who have still a job or who had a job and they are retired. This is what they think. So the job of the leaders is to give jobs to those young people. And this is why I'm fighting for growth. Growth is politics, economy is politics. So this is the way we can get a new trend, a new course. And we need help from the United States. And this is what I said the other day to many economists of Princeton. I said there was Mr. Kruger, there was the former councillor, Mr. Clinton. I said, we need you speak louder about the absurdities we are committing in European Union. We need your help. And this is the reason why I want to thank you, Sophie, to give me the opportunity to talk through Princeton University, a very prestigious and famous, wonderful place where ideas are free. We need to have free ideas in Europe, not prejudiced. So this is the job I see. And somebody asked me, thank you, what should I do if I would do again as a minister? First, I would say the same thing and do the same thing, but made in France, because it's a good program. I'd like Mr. Macron, who is going on after me, I'd like him to do the same. What would I do as different? Well, I would try to convince, as the New York Daily Post said, I'm Superman, so I'd like, as a new Superman in New York City, I'd like to convince my president and prime minister that they are making big mistakes. I failed to convince them. I'd like that electorate. I wouldn't like the electorate do it in my place, if you understand what I mean. Yes, I think so. Should we help little companies instead of big ones? It has been noticed that the new monetary policy, who use the channel of transmitting the new money through the banks, doesn't work. European banks have received billions and billions of facilities. They don't use it for investing in economy. Many, many companies with good projects say, we're fed up with banks. We are managing our affairs without banks. My business, I will manage without any bank. We are bypassing banks. And that's the reason why I've decided a crowdfunding law and passed a bill to help the society to get involved in new businesses. Because banks, they are frightened. And sometimes there was a banker, we were talking, and sometimes they are saying, they open their heart and their mind, and they say, you know, bankers, their job is not to lend money. It is to give money to their shareholders. That's all. And that's what they are doing. That's the trouble with banks. I think we have problem with European banks for financing the little company. The big ones have money. They have much money, the money they want. The little ones have not. And we have created a public bank, which name is BPI, Public Bank of Investment. But it's 5% of the market. That's not enough. We need more. So this is the question we have to face. In Germany, there is a public bank bigger than in France, 20% more or less. Well, it's better for the little company. But there is another tradition, preferring little companies, medium companies than bigger. So, thank you.
Okay, then let me ask you one last question as a conclusion. Do you feel that there are things you can say here that you could not say in France? Or do you think that there are things that you say here that are heard, but that Europeans would have, would be deaf to?
Thank you for this very clear question, Sophie. What I say here, I say it in Europe, in France, everywhere. This is the same language. But here, everybody listens. There, nobody does. Why? Why? Because everybody thinks that the politician who says, stop austerity, they listen, he's a demagogue. He's for laxism. He wants more expenditures and less taxes. This is very easy. But sometimes the reality, the good solutions, may be the one that people want to listen to. Sometimes it happens. And my talk means that all the world thinks that we should stop austerity. And there is a mystery that our leaders are following on. And that's why we have to fight on political ground to make understand that we have to avoid the suicide pact, as said Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize. Thank you for Woodward Wilson School to invite me. Thank you for Princeton University. Thank you all. And thank you to be so kind to me and with my difficult English. Thank you very much.